Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm wearing two different eyeshadow palettes on each of my eyes. Though I say palette, I only grabbed two shades from each. But nevertheless, this is a little bit of a dupe video for the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk quad. So on my right eye, I am wearing these two shades all over. And then on my left eye, I am featuring shades from the Rom&nd Better Than palette in Rosebud Garden. They are both very rosy, very girly, very similar. The Rom&nd Better Than Eyes palette, I think I got it for around $13 because it was on sale, but I believe its retail price is around $25, whereas the Charlotte Tilbury quads retail for $53. When it comes to Charlotte Tilbury, I find her packaging to be very whatever. Nothing about it is so hefty or aesthetic or luxurious that it really feels like, oh, this is where my money is going. Where I feel my money is going is towards having a formulation that is very, very easy to slap on and hard to mess up, and a color story that is genuinely pretty flattering for a lot of skin tones, and having or at least having the option of various color stories that can look good on lots of skin tones. So for me, what stood out about the Charlotte Tilbury palette is that, again, it's just really, really easy for me to slap on. A lot of the days when I don't really know what I want to wear, but maybe I'm feeling something more, this is the easiest one to put on. I'm a huge fan of this sort of rosy brown color. I find it very, very fun and flattering for my skin. It is arguably a little bit warm, but I feel really pretty. So let's talk about which shades kind of match up between these two palettes here. On this side, I have all of the Charlotte Tilbury shadows swatch. So there is that pinky champagne, the dusty warm pink color, this rosy brown, and then the glittery shade. According to the back, it goes 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'll address them as such. And then coordinating to the shade 1, there is nothing in the Rom&nd palette. This shade is made up basically exclusively of mattes or glitters, so there's nothing that's like a fine shimmer or satin in there. But to compare against shade number 2, I have swatched reddish soil and soft mauve. You can see they're a bit more pink, but how things swatch and how things look on the eye definitely translate differently. And then to coordinate with color number 3, I personally used soft matte, but I did also soft mauve, and then I did also want to show how solid brown looks compared. It's much, much deeper, but it is a similar color to number 3, just deepened by a significant amount. And then against the shade number 4, the pop shade, I have Gold Sparkle swatched, and shade number 4 is quite smooth, quite sheer, with a little bit of like a rose gold bright glitter to it, whereas this shade Gold Sparkle is much, much chunkier. It's quite flaky and a little bit hard to blend out. It's almost a little scratchy to my fingers to feel, and it's much more dimensional. It's got all sorts of different glitters in it. So there's some coppery glitters, there's some like bright light glitters, and the effect is much, much more eye-catching, I think. You can see that the colors from the Rom&nd are definitely a bit brighter, more pink on my swatches, but how they perform and look on the eye, I think actually translate a little bit differently and kind of equals them out in how they look. So I would put both of these formulations very, very similarly. Like I would put both of these into one category of being very soft matte, easy to blend out, kind of you have to build it, but because of that it's hard to make mistakes with. And then in a completely other category, I would put something like Anastasia shadows, which are very, very buttery soft to the touch, picks up a lot of pigment, packs down a lot of pigment, and maybe you have to be a little bit more careful where you first place down your eyeshadow on your eyes. But since this is a comparison video, I'm going to kind of nitpick the differences here. Okay, this should be pretty easy. I'm going to try to coordinate colors on both eyes, and I'll be going into my little color switcher things in between. So starting off on this eye, I'm going to use our enhanced shade, which is this dusty pink shade. Pick up just a little bit, and I'm going to kind of haphazardly plop that onto most of my eyelids, starting in the center, and then just buff that out. Then I'm going to use a slightly smaller brush for this smoke shade, and keep that a little bit closer to the lash line. Bring it into the outer corner and kind of extend it into a little bit of a V over here. I'm also going to bring whatever is left over onto my bottom lash line. I'm going to use this dusty pink shade. This one is also pretty close. And then with my littler brush, I'm going to tap into the second deepest shade in this palette. So I basically use the same techniques on both sides. And as you can see, there's just more going on the Charlotte Tilbury side. There's like a little bit more oomph, whereas in order to build up that same amount, I would have to use more product of the Rom&nd palette. But I kind of just wanted to show the effect of if I do about the same thing with the similar colors on each side, how things kind of end up. I'm gonna even things out, still just keeping one side to its own, and put on some mascara, and we'll keep talking. So I found that with the Charlotte Tilbury one, there is a little bit more smoothness and evenness of pigment and a little bit more pigment in general. So I find that I might pop this out all over my eyes and then have to go in with like less product or a clean brush to shear out the edges of where I put that product down, where conversely with the Rom&nd palette, I found that it kind of wants to shear itself out on the edges, and you have to build up where you want more impact. So if I use that same technique of just kind of plopping things down on the center of my lid, wherever, the edges would just kind of blend out themselves, and I found myself tapping in more to put product specifically on the edges to kind of buff it and build it out more to create a more similar effect on both eyes. On its own, it kind of just wants to stay where you put it, and you really have to like build up where you want more impact. But again, both are very, very easy to use. They both blend really well. The differences are quite subtle. They're very like smooth and soft and not buttery at all to the touch. They've got some firmness to them. I think between the mattes, they provide a very similar experience on the eyes in terms of just being flattering, easy to use. A lot of the things that drew me towards the Charlotte Tilbury one. The Rom&nd one surely holds up, and if it was just between like that experience alone, I would recommend the Rom&nd palette first. Speaking of that, I really, really like the packaging on this. It feels really, really sturdy. The plastic is quite thick. It's compact while having a little bit of heft to it. It just feels pretty much like as good as the Charlotte Tilbury one if I didn't know anything about what like the branding behind Charlotte Tilbury meant, I would think that these two fell in a pretty similar price point. So for all those reasons, it makes me want to recommend the Rom&nd one over the Charlotte Tilbury one. In fact, it's got all these pretty mattes and you can do a little bit more with it. However, it does have these glitters. So let's talk about that real quick. The glitters, beautiful, so pretty. So I had Swatch Gold Sparkle, but here on my wrist, they are like sheer pinky sparkles with like different densities of how big and dramatic the sparkle is, and some are a little bit more like pinky and multi-dimensional. In any case, they're super pretty. However, on Yesa, one of the top ingredients is PET glitter, and I believe what that means is that it's just like normal plastic glitter as opposed to particularly eye safe glitter. And I believe the distinction is that like the edges of where the glitter is cut has not been like sanded and rounded down. You can correct me if this is wrong, but in any case, glitter in general is bad for the environment, but these like PET glitters can definitely be more irritating for your eyelids, and if they happen to get into your eye, they can definitely scratch and damage your eye and be much more likely to do that than eye safe glitters. And that just makes me like a little bit unnecessarily anxious. I don't need that from my makeup. There's like a few ColourPop eyeshadows that use that kind of glitter, and I just don't put them on my eyes. I just don't. There's so much pretty makeup out there that it's like I don't have to. So if that's something that's never really bothered you, I would say this palette is really pretty, including the glitters. They look so delicate and so sparkly. I'm not convinced that I don't know according to that ingredients list, because it was just the ingredients list for this palette, you know, not for each individual shade. So I'm not sure if each one of them, if there are any of them that have eye safe glitters instead. But even like if I'm not using the glitters in here, because to be honest, I don't reach for the glittery topper shade in the Charlotte Tilbury palette that often. So if I'm just talking about like the mattes, super pretty, super comparable. I think my takeaway from this experience is essentially that the luxuriousness and ease of use that I am getting and paying for with this Charlotte Tilbury palette is probably not really worth the price, because it's not as unique as I thought. I can get a very similar vibe from these palettes, and though I only have the Rom&nd one in front of me to kind of compare and contrast against the Charlotte Tilbury one, from what I'm aware of, a lot of Asian beauty eyeshadow tends to veer into that much more sheer, buildable, soft quality to their shadows. So that I find is similar to the Charlotte Tilbury eyeshadow formula, but also there are so many colorways I saw that are very similar to this from different brands. Even Rom&nd has like a little quad that falls into like the same rosy category. Basically every like major Asian beauty brand I saw had at least one option that was similar to this, and by the transitive property is similar to the Charlotte Tilbury one. I'm not convinced the Charlotte Tilbury one is worth the money, which I always kind of knew. Just wanted to share this comparison for you. In any case, I think that's all I have for you today, so let me know if you have any questions, if this was helpful, and thank you for watching as always.